what's really interesting about season 7 is season 7 was hated so much because of some of the changes that were made in the way that they did the promo.
You know, obviously you've talked about being on the show and how that changed your life. Is something like All Stars something you've ever thought about?
Yes, Jasmine and Kennedy wanted to go home. They kept saying it, or not Kennedy. Jasmine and Candy wanted to go home. They kept saying it over and over. It's like, let me go home. I want to go. I want to go. They had to coach Jasmine to come back to the set. It's very stressful. There's always time for a cocktail.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back for some more freshly brewed drag tea. Today, I have with me a funny and charismatic queen who charmed us all with her humour and kindness when she competed on season 7 of RuPaul's Drag Race. I'm super excited for you all to get to know her better and learn more about her amazing journey in drag. We'll of course be talking all things Drag Race, and I'll be asking some of the amazing questions you all sent in. So please join me in welcoming the always fabulous Mrs. Kasha Davis. Hi.
Hi, gorgeous. How are you? Look at because it's long distance and it goes right over the pond, I had to use 2 phones to get out of this basement. But what's great is they can go on speaker. So we'll just put these over here, and with modern technology, we are hands-free. How about that?
That's very modern of you. Thank you so much for joining me. I know my subscribers were so excited to hear from you. I had the most amount of questions I've ever had submitted when I said I was interviewing you, and I loved you on the show. So it's such an honor to speak to you.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so grateful that you reached out. And I have to tell you, I specifically, one of my, what am I trying to say? Things that I brought home. What's that called? Souvenir. The souvenir is my mug from Buckingham Palace. And so I have that with some freshly brewed tension tamer tea just for the occasion.
Thank you. Very on brand. And obviously it's fitting, you know, Buckingham Palace for a queen.
Well, yes.
Well, thank you so much. Obviously, I'm really excited to speak to you. And I think it'd be great if we could start off just to hear a bit back more about where you start, how you started in drag, where your drag name comes from, and your sort of how you got into that world of drag.
Oh, wonderful. Well, so I grew up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and you may know that from The Office. It's from the television show The Office, which we stole from you. And that upbringing was very much like The Office. You know, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and back then, Liberace, Elton John, Barry Manilow, they were all straight. You know, everybody was in the closet. I went to school for theater. I had this gravitational pull to the stage. And I remember my first time being in drag was in college. Actually, my hair was almost like this. I played the witch in Hansel and Gretel. And I had these long fingernails, and I remember telling my dad, I'm sorry, Dad, I have to keep these on all week because, you know, it's for my character. And I did not. So, but it was a children's theater production, and it was my joy to express this side of myself, because in that upbringing, I was told to keep the feminine qualities about myself suppressed. I was able to find my way to theater, and that was okay because I was being celebrated on stage. But around the house, the first times I heard fairy and other nasty words about my femininity were from my family and my father and my grandfather. And so I was always suppressing that. So it was this first release of a part of myself. Fast forward, I got into another career of telemarketing, which was like doing theater sales in terms of promoting things and stuff like that. But I did not follow the dream of theater. And lo and behold, I saw Pandora Box, Darian Lake, Ambrosia Salad, Aggie June, all these fabulous queens at the club here. And I asked to go on stage after seeing these drag queens. I said, I want to try to do my thing. And so I entered the stage with the help of Mr. Davis right from the get-go. I said, well, I know what my name is going to be. First pet, first street. Kasha, an angry white poodle from Scranton, Pennsylvania. Davis, a boring street in Scranton. You know, she was basic. I wanted to be this camp, big drag queen. And my my drag mother, who had an accent, a bit of a, I think it was Puerto Rican, I'm not sure. But she was like, okay, baby. She had a very low voice like this, a smoker's voice. And she said, okay, baby, you want to go over there and hang out with the strippers? And I said, no, I'm a married woman. Oh, she's married. She's Mrs. Kasha Davis. And I thought that was really neat. And so that's where the Mrs. came in, and I began the journey right with Darian and Pandora here in Rochester, New York.
Wow, that's so cool that you have like your drag name effectively is like that's how they find the porn star names, isn't it? It's first,
yes.
First tree. But for you it worked. Like that's a really cool name.
Well, a lot. It's interesting. One time after season 7, I was on tour, and the promoter was like, "Oh, I'm such a fan. I love you so much. You're the best." I said, "Oh, thank you." My ego, you know. And then she was also performing, so she went on stage and she said, "Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Katya David." You're not a fan. So it's hard for people to remember Mrs. And I don't know why Kasha can be so confusing. And then Davis, they'll call me Davis, Davies. Go with it.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully everyone here knows that your name is Mrs. Katya Davies.
That's all right.
Mrs. Kasha Davis. No, I think it's a really cool name, and it makes you stand out because not many people have like Mr. and Mrs. in their actual name. So I think it's really cool, and it fits your personality of this camp, larger than life.
Yes. And I wanted to celebrate what I didn't see when I was a child. I did not see, well, there was no drag being seen, but what I didn't see was when I saw drag, I didn't see a married couple being celebrated. Of course, marriage equality had just started in the midst of my drag career, but the idea of this is a happily married, stable, fun-loving couple.
Yeah, that's obviously a lovely story. And then speaking of that, obviously you are married, hence the Mrs. part. How long have you been married, and sort of how did that sort of come about with the drag and everything? Was that before drag or after drag?
Well, so we're together 20 years. And Mr. Davis was there. So we went on this trip to P-Town. I don't know if you know where P-Town is. It's Cape Cod. It's this little gay, little artsy, everybody's welcome little village. And I went there and we saw Miss Richfield 1981. And I had seen Pandora and Darian and the other gals. And Mr. Davis and I were there, and we solidified the fact that we were going to be, a couple. We had been dating, but we were like, you know what? We're on this trip. We are a couple. And we were celebrating that. And we went out and saw this character, Miss Richfield 1981. Oh, and I was blown away because she was telling stories, and she was camp, and she had a message at the end, and she sung live. Excuse me, I have a little tickle. So the girls at home weren't singing live. And I was thrilled. And so Mr. Davis and I, on the way home, it was a 10-hour drive. We talked all about what Mrs. Kasha Davis would be like and her backstory. Because see, I had the theater background. And, Mrs. Kasha Davis, international celebrity housewife. I could tell you all kinds of stories of where she came from, what she did, what she had for breakfast. So to me, she's a character who's a real person versus just simply dressing up. And we've done that together right from the get-go. If there wasn't Mr. Davis, there's a lot of things in my life that would not be so good. He's so stable, and I'm the wild and wacky one.
Well, that's a lovely story, and that's so heartwarming, and it's sort of, I think it's great representation as well to the younger audiences who watch it, that not everyone who goes on the show is young and single and doesn't have that kind of, it shows the sort of more mature lady and also the people who are in stable relationships. And I think that's a really lovely story. And obviously your name conveys that.
Well, yes. And I thank you. And I will say too, some people, you mentioned I wasn't young, which we know just by looking at me, but also I celebrate the fact that I am surviving to this age and that I am doing what I love. And I hope to inspire others who are out there watching, no matter what age you are. You have every right, and you should be doing whatever it is you love. This is our life, and we should be out there living it and having fun.
No, definitely. I think I think that's the lovely thing about the show, when they cast people of different ages and you show, and I have so much respect for obviously anyone of any age that does it and has that talent, and also people that paved the way for us younger people. Not that I'm that young, but I mean, I'm young compared to some people, but like that's what I loved about you and some of the other bitter old lady brigade, the old people.
Miss Kasha Davis, Jasmine, and Kennedy and myself, we just call ourselves the bitter old lady brigade. But we don't mean any harm, girl, except when we do.
I thought you all like were so cool and you had such a different outlook, not better or worse, just different. And I really appreciated that.
Good. I appreciate that too. There's room for everybody. And a lot of these girls do death drops. And if I did a death drop, it would be literal. So we don't want that. Not right now.
Yeah, and so obviously speaking of the show, so I think people probably like my audience will best know you from season 7 of RuPaul's Drag Race. Had you auditioned for previous seasons before?
I did. So I auditioned for all 7 seasons right from the beginning. The first season, what they were looking for was a drag queen and their assistant. And so myself and Aggie Doon, who I've been doing shows with since the beginning, she and I auditioned, and we were like, either one of us will be the assistant, either one of us will be the drag queen. We were in, and we sent our envelope with our VHS tape, I believe, or the little tapes with glitter and confetti. So when you opened it, it was like, and then I auditioned every year afterwards, because you see Pandora Box got on season 2, and she's one of our castmates and friends. We did so many different projects together. So it was this reality of sort of someone I know making it meant I could too. So I had been auditioning every single year. And then finally by season 7, it clicked. And I think the producers will say that they had enjoyed watching the progress and the changes that I went through in my drag to get to that point. And it still continues to evolve and change to this day.
Yeah, and that's really fascinating to hear that you auditioned every time. What do you sort of know why on the 7th time that was the charm? Is that, looking back on it, can you sort of see why maybe that was the time?
I can. I think there are 2 things that really hit home. Number 1, everyone says just be yourself. That is such a difficult thing to do sometimes, but it's the truth. Oftentimes someone, for sake of conversation, like a Trixie Mattel, has a very specific look. A lot of queens are inspired by that, and then they emulate Trixie Mattel. So I was giving you other queens that were on, and I was trying to be like them because you must like them. So if that's what you want. And so then I was realizing, after every take that Mr. Davis and I were recording here in our home, and all the auditions were from our home, being a housewife, we realized if it didn't feel like me, if it wasn't authentic to me, then we cut it and redid it. So that was the first thing. And the second thing is that I mentioned in my audition that I was willing to give up the safety of my day job to become a full-time performing drag artist. And it was my dream to be a full-time performer. And I think that is also something they were waiting for. Because I kind of was like, oh, I have a great career, I have this great life, and drag is fun. Yeah, sure, I'd like to be on the show. I didn't say it that way, but that's how it came across.
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes I guess just saying you're willing to take the step is like a mental shift in yourself, and then that in itself changes the way you
Yes, and you're applying to represent RuPaul. RuPaul's like Santa Claus, right? And all the rest of us are the little mall elves. And so we're all spreading the goodness of our own true stories all around the globe at this point. And so you're auditioning and you're applying to work for this company. So how dare I say, I'd like to do it, but just part-time. So I think those 2 things really made the difference.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously, we're so glad that you did and you got on season 7. I think season 7 was a really good place to be, because I think that was when Drag Race was really starting to come into its own. I think some of the earlier seasons, they were still figuring out what the show was. And I think by season 7, they were really getting into the groove of it. I don't know if you feel the same.
Well, there's so many different ways you can look at it. Everybody has their favorites, and it's so much fun, right? So people have favorites from right from the beginning to our current seasons, and then all of the franchises around the world. But what's really interesting about season 7 is season 7 was hated so much because of some of the changes that were made in the way that they did the promo, and just the general take of, after season 6, I mean, Bianca Del Rio is absolutely incredible. That top 4 was outstanding. And so for us to come off of that was a different cast, and we were all our own individuals. So I believe as a cast, we had to work a little bit harder And I think if you look up every single one of us from that season, we've made a go of it. Whereas if you look at other seasons, there's some people who have disappeared.
That's exactly what I was going to say, that season 7, I always thought, after it came out, not for a few seasons afterwards, it had a slightly negative reputation of people saying that it was a bit lackluster or whatever. And I think, you know, Ginger Minj even mentioned it in All Stars 2.
Season 7 got a lot of hate for being a lackluster bunch of girls. So I am here to say, now, Miss Thang, we are just as talented and worthy as the rest of these girls.
You look at the people from your season, so many of them, everyone has got a career. Some of them, you know, like Trixie and Katya have gone kind of stratospheric, and they've now become some of the most well-known people. And it's crazy that loads of them have come from your season.
Yes. And it's just fascinating to me how many queens from the franchise all across the world are making this global impact of being yourself and this positivity, so that, you know, some of these gals become, like you said, just superstars. And I'm thrilled for them because, you know, upon their success, I can, you know, sort of latch on to that as well with my performances and my appearances, as well as people who have never even had an interest in auditioning for RuPaul's Drag Race, because drag is becoming more mainstream.
Definitely. I think Drag Races, it's brought an art form that already existed into people's living rooms. That's what they always say, and it's so true. And I think it also combines the fact that everyone loves a bit of drama and reality TV, and I guess it mixes all of those things of talented people, drama, and then drag is the medium through which it's done. It's obviously, it's a great show.
Well, and if you think about other reality television shows, not many people continue on to have a career like the Drag Race girls, because people go back and watch them. Maybe some other shows, competitions, they may not do that. Now people become successful and open restaurants on, you know, cooking shows and baking shows and become and cookbooks and all these different things. But what I'm saying is that it becomes sort of this, if you start on season 14 of a season or whatever, and then you're like, well, I want to go back and watch the others, and people go back and watch it and become, I'm so grateful to say that I continue to gain new fans.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great show and it's a great platform for all of you queens that go on. And what did it feel like then getting the call to say that you were going to be on after all of those auditions?
Oh my gosh, it was exciting and it was a relief. You know, you really go through the ringer. I'm sure you have heard in the audition process, and they really expect a lot out of you, and they want to get the gist of what you can do, what drag you have, excuse me, what you'd be willing to do. And so after many interviews and many phone calls and many different, but it was a relief. And I just figured, oh, well, this is it. She's can leave her career. And it still began. In any kind of gig worker will tell you, it has the ups and downs. It has a roller coaster ride, and you will find that there are times when you're busy, and there are times when you're not. Unfortunately for me, I was in a sales industry before where I had to make cold calls. And so I'm used to saying yes to interviews, saying yes to opportunities to continue to promote myself. And so that is really, that's the ticket to continuing, because once you film something like that, there's nothing you can do about it. You know, it's filmed, it's done. They're going to edit it. You'll hear many queens will say, well, I got the bad edit. Well, you were there, you know, and you signed the contracts that said, you know, we can make this however we wish. So, you know, it's always about the opportunity, and be grateful for that, but it's what comes next, what you do with it.
Yeah, they say that the real race starts after Drag Race, and I guess it's true. Do you think that, therefore, would you say that Drag Race has changed your life? Completely.
The biggest, okay, so first off, as I mentioned, I left a career of 18 years with a wonderful salary and a 401k and a retirement plan. I am so grateful to have a husband who's upstairs working from home, who was, yes, let's do this. It's a good time in our life, and you're not getting any younger, and this is a dream you've always wanted. You've always said this, let's do it. So very grateful. And then, as I mentioned, it was busy with the promos of season 7, and then it got quiet, and I had no work. And you know my catchphrase, there's always time for a cocktail. Well, I was left home alone to my own devices. I didn't drink at work previously, but I was a binge drinker after work pretty much every night, or at least the weekends. And so I started to drink during the day. And then it was just got out of hand. And so because of RuPaul's Drag Race, I credit this change in my life where I needed to take a look at my drinking and the why I was drinking, the reasons why. And I'm now just a little over 7 years sober, one day at a time. But it's completely, talk about a change. And because of that change, I am more present, ready, clear, and motivated to continue on with the career.
Well, congratulations, obviously, on 7 years sober. That's amazing. Yeah, one of the questions I was actually going to ask, lots of people wanted to know where it's always time for there's always time for a cocktail, where that came from.
There's always time for a cocktail.
There's always time for a cocktail. That came from Pandora Box and I doing a show. Pandora Box and I were doing a show, and it was her spin of like a Saturday Night Live or a sketch show, and it was called The Gay Means Happy Show. And she had asked me, you want to do something where you're like a cooking show and you're Mrs. Kasha Davis cooking from home? And I said, sure. And she said, well, what do you have? And I said, I have this recipe for chocolate balls. We never wrote a script. We went to her apartment at the time and we set together a kitchen and we just improvised. And, you know, so if you watch it on YouTube, you'll see that I turn and I'll be cooking whatever over here. And then I turn to the camera like that. So we wanted to have these moments. So I would turn to the camera and say, there's always time for a cocktail. Because in the midst of making the preparation, my character, Mrs. Kasha Davis, would be like, well, and you know, while this is setting over here, you can make yourself a little drink. And then, you know, the boozy housewife gets hammered by the end and doesn't really care about the recipe. She just wants to be drunk.
I mean, that's a great character. So, I mean,
yes.
we all loved the catchphrase.
Yes. Well, it's like, you know, everybody's favorite auntie who drank too much and kisses you and then hurts your ear. So we did Kasha's Balls of Love. We did Beer in the Rear Chicken. And I think we did another one. But so we did a couple of those, and they were just, I mean, people just thought it was so silly because you can relate to that auntie who just, you know, it's sort of Julia Child's on crack.
That's a great description of your drag character, I guess.
Yeah.
No, and it's really fun to hear that that's sort of how you got involved. Like that was a big way you got involved with someone else like Pandora, who was also a legend and was on Drag Race. When you got cast eventually on season 7, so obviously the first day you walked through the door, what did that feel like finally being there in the big pink room?
I can go back to that moment. Okay, so they take you have to wake up at like 5 a.m, get into drag. They take you from your hotel room where you're locked up and taped away and no one can talk to each other. And they bring you to your private dressing room, and then you're in the private dressing room for another hour, it seems. And then they bring you to the set, and the mirror, I have to tell you, this mirror, I've never seen such a tall mirror. It's a wide, tall mirror. And they said, last looks, Kasha. So you get your last looks. I looked in the mirror, and the stage manager said, are you ready for your life to change? And I said, I certainly am. And he said, Kasha Davis, on 3, 2, 1, go. And I just felt this change. It was as if I stepped into this other realm. And when I walked onto the set, of course, there were a couple of queens were to the left, and straight ahead were multiple cameras, and they gave us some direction to stay there a little longer, as you know, edit a little bit. And I was like on a high. I walked over to the girls, and immediately I'm like, what did I do? You know, the self-doubt started to come in, but I was there, and it was exciting because I have been a longtime fan of the I Love Lucy show and Lucille Ball. And as a kid, I used to be like, I want to work with her. I want to be Ethel. You know, Mrs. Kasha Davis is sort of like that character in a show. You know, from Are You Being Served? What is the woman with the blue hair and the green hair? Mrs. Slocum. So yes. This is Mrs. Kasha Davis is like Mrs. Slocum. You know, she's this character who isn't the main character. She happens to be. So I always wanted to be. And they told me, they said, Kasha, we want you to know that this studio we're filming in is where I Love Lucy was originally filmed. So it was like this magical spiritual moment.
Well, that's lovely, and it's so nice that, because on camera you seemed like so at ease. As soon as you walked in and you were like, "Hi, honeys, I'm home," like I immediately knew who you were as a person. I was like, "Oh, I love her already."
Oh, thank you. And I have to tell you, you reminded me. My "Hi, my honeys, I'm home" was something my mother used to say, and she's passed on. So I like to keep my mother and my grandmother alive in my drag character.
Oh, that's lovely. And I guess I imagine that's probably, maybe you were inspired by your mother in terms of your drag character anyway, being this sort of housewife. And
Yes, my mother was the ultimate housewife, you know, but you remember this was the 70s and 80s, so she was fighting it, you know. She wanted to have her own career, and she started out as a housewife, 5 kids, and she ended up in Avon products, door-to-door cosmetic sales. So she's this over-the-top Italian diva, always dressed to the nines. And her mother, who I adored, my grandmother, was in vaudeville back in the 1940s, and she was a whistler, and she had these gowns and gorgeous hairdos, statuesque model-like, and she would whistle in vaudeville days and host the shows. So I have this sort of diva background.
Well, that definitely works. Like, you know, like that's how you kind of come across. You come across as this kind of like housewife diva who may or may not have been in vaudeville herself. Like that's exactly who you are.
Right. Perfect. That's exactly what I hope to express.
Yeah, definitely. And so obviously you mentioned, obviously you walk in, you do your introduction, and then you turn to see the other girls. When you eventually saw the whole cast, did you know any of them from before?
I recognized Miss Fame from this promotion where she did half her face was in drag and half of it wasn't. I did not know anybody else.
Okay. So you didn't know anyone, or even you didn't even know of them?
I didn't, just Miss Fame. And so, you know, I had this sort of like secluded little drag life here in Rochester, and I knew the girls, and I had my show that was an impersonation show that I did with Aggie Dune. And so I didn't travel before that. I didn't know a lot of other queens. So it was all new to me.
Yeah, I guess America is, as a country, is so huge, and it's such a big country with huge drag scenes. So I can see why you wouldn't necessarily know everyone. It's not like in some other countries where it's a very small drag scene. America is ginormous. So it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, there were a lot of girls from LA and then the South. I mean, I certainly knew of the pageant scene, and I had been familiar with the scenes, but I didn't know a lot. I didn't know anybody.
And so we touched earlier a bit on the whole issue of sort of age and the bitter old lady brigade, as it was called. And you know, that was you, Ginger Minge, Kennedy Davenport, and
Katya.
And is that something that you was that something that was taken seriously? Like, did you kind of feel affinity to them because they were sort of slightly older, or was it just more you just clicked because of your personalities?
I think it was more so that, so Miss Fame and Pearl, I believe, at least Miss Fame mostly, kept talking about her brand. That's not my brand. That's my and Jasmine and I were like, what is she talking about, her brand, right? And then we all had this similar, like we knew each other's style of drag. But yet Violet and Miss Fame and Pearl, they were a new kind of drag that we weren't familiar with. And I think in some cases, you know, we were being considered old, and we were like, oh, these young kids don't know what they're doing, you know, which wasn't fair either, because I certainly have learned so much. And Trixie, I mean, she came back, but she went home before me in the season, because we were just like, what is happening? You know, what is this type of drag? So we became sort of bitter, like we didn't get it. But now we learn so much in our process and growth in drag, where we've learned from one another. But yeah, so it was a lot about like brand and being fashion and a look queen that we weren't aware of that. We knew that in our type of drag, it was go to the gig, get the show, cabaret style show, live singing or lip sync, and pageantry.
Yeah, I mean, it was fun to sort of see the side of it. And like you said, you also on the show talked about how you all had an affinity for each other because you had a similar background, but also you could learn something from the younger people, which I thought was a really cool mix of it. And it shows you why having a mix of different ages and different backgrounds works on Drag Race, because you can all learn from each other.
Absolutely. I'm learning so much still to this day. I think if you're not learning, you're not living. I really believe that saying. I don't know who said it, somebody wiser than me, but I really believe that because if you stop, you're stuck, and I don't want to be stuck. I want to continue to learn, even if it's just something as simple as a different style of makeup or a different costume designer or these types of things. And then it just helps you in your career.
Yeah, and do you think then, does age play a factor in drag at all?
Absolutely. Age plays a factor in the entertainment business, period. You see it. Everybody knows it. I don't know that it's necessarily, I mean, I have been a fan of Tina Turner since I can ever remember. And she went to the UK and then stayed overseas because it seems as though, and I've read this and seen her say this, and I've had many others, that there is less of ageism there, and people continue to respect, say, somebody like Tina for years and years and years into her retirement. Where in the US, it's like, who's the hot commodity? And then they dump them. So that is the entertainment business. It's celebrating youth. And I think what's fun about drag is sometimes you're ageless, even though I play even a little bit older than I am, I'm catching up. So, which I'm grateful for. But, I think that we have an opportunity now as drag queens, and like, look at Charlie Hines, she looks incredible, and she continues to work every single day, every week, and inspire and change and evolve and grow. So I think it's changing to a degree, but for the most part, ageism is what it is in the entertainment industry, and youth is celebrated far more. I mean, every skin product is to make you look younger. It's always about youth. We can continue to chase that, but the inevitable is happening to us all.
Yeah, and I think what you said was really interesting about drag queens are quite often ageless, especially if you play a character a bit like you, Pandora, even someone like Jinx Monsoon, who was quite young when she was first on, but she played a much older character, which almost right. It's unusual, but it's quite cool because it kind of puts you in this timeless age era in a way.
Absolutely. That's fun. I love those characters that were on different television shows that were, the neighbor or the nosy neighbor or the mom, and to play those characters, there's a level of positivity there. And I think there's longevity because, you can continue to stick with a certain age range.
Yeah. And I think I thought your fashion was always so good on Drag Race. I thought you always had an element of camp, but also camp glamour. And the first mini challenge was the fall, spring fall runway. And then obviously for the main challenge, you had to design your own born naked resort wear tearaway for a naked suit underneath. What was that like walking the stage for the first time on Drag Race?
Oh, so I had competed in a couple pageants, and I never really loved the fashion aspect of drag. I liked the glamorous aspect of drag, emulating Joan Collins, emulating these divas, my mother, my grandmother. But to walk a runway was never a passion of mine, or to be in a fashion magazine. Let's face it, I am camp, and that's not necessarily considered fashionable. I have a respect for those that can achieve it and do it. So for me, a little nerve-wracking, but at the same time, as long as I can put my spin on it, I'm good to go.
I really enjoyed your fashion. I thought it was very, like you said, timeless fashion, but in its campy, which always, I think, gives it a nice edge, but still fashionable. And I always thought you had that kind of slightly almost like old Hollywood vibe, but a bit campy. I really enjoyed that.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Thank you.
And so for the first week, you were safe. And then you go into the next week, which was the Rusical, the Glamazonian Airways. And you did your little sort of scat number, and I thought that was really funny. What was that like doing that kind of, had you done anything like that before?
Oh, sure. I mean, it was a campy, kooky kind of a character. And Sasha wanted it first, and then I also wanted it. And Ginger said, let's have you audition. And Ginger chose me. So I think that's why they said she won the challenge, because the way she directed the group. I'll argue that most people who watch back remember, if they remember Glamazonian Airways, they remember, and so they remember that character. So it's been wonderful. I've had people make little figurines and stuffies and different things for me, and it's great. That is very Mrs. Kasha Davis at a club. That's what you would expect to see, something like that.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Watching, I was like, that looks like what she does every night at the club. And you had so much fun sitting on all of the pit crew's laps, and like it was so fun. I loved it. You were so funny.
Thank you. Yes, fun.
And so you were safe that week, but high. And I think some may argue that you should have won the challenge, or you were definitely up there. And then you go into the next week, which was the acting challenge, the ShakesQueer. Is that something else that how did you feel about that? Did you feel confident? Have you done acting before?
Yes, so I went to school for theater. I've done all sorts of acting. I played Macbeth in Shakespeare, not ShakesQueer. I was queer, but you know the story. And I had been on stage many different productions. I was nervous about receiving a script and 5 minutes later having to have it memorized without any rehearsal. I wasn't thinking about television having like the opportunity to do a few takes and chase this thing. So it was fun. It was clear I was chosen to be Miss Chardonnay as the boozy older queen, and it made sense that I was sort of the kind of the judgy older gal. So I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. I don't think that particular episode and that performance is celebrated very much. A lot of people think it was terrible.
So that was going to be my question. I think it was an iconic challenge just because your group was actually the safe group, like you
right.
Whatever your whole group, but you were safe. But the other group, obviously, that was kind of a bit shambles, and RuPaul even said this is the worst I've ever seen in 7 seasons. I was going to ask, did you know that that's what was going to happen? Did you see the other group, or was it when you watched it back on the tape for the first time that you realized how bad it was?
We knew then it was bad, and because RuPaul really flipped out, because their group didn't want to do it, they didn't want to try, they didn't want to do a second take, they were not being very cooperative. In our group, Jaden struggled with the memorization and burst into tears and had that moment. But it was fixed. Again, the pressure of having to memorize in minutes is really what I think it came down to. And I think there was some of the gals just didn't know, they didn't feel as though they knew what to do. And so there was struggling there, but Ru made a point of it. I mean, just that group got really ripped to shreds. So we knew it was not good.
And so one thing I've always wondered on that particular episode, because I thought that episode was iconic, maybe not for the right reasons, but it was definitely memorable. Yeah. After they played each performance, they sort of cut to the judges, and on your teams, they sort of like laughed, or like Ru pretended to cry. Right. And then when we got to the other teams, there was like a smattering of applause, and everyone looked really awkward.
Well, there you have it, ladies.
Was that how it really was when you were watching it back on stage, or is that kind of done for editing purposes?
As far as I can remember, that's how it really was. I think they camped it up and played it up a little bit, but Ru was not happy.
I think that's one of the first times, and maybe only times really, that we've seen Ru really snap it and say, be prepared, just do it, stop giving me crap.
Yeah. Ru and Pearl had a lot of friction.
Yes. We'll get that was one of my questions for later. We'll get to that in a minute. But one thing I wanted to ask was, when you, on your trajectory, on your track record, so you were safe, high, safe. That was sort of for the first 3 episodes. Did you then go into episode 4 feeling quite good and quite confident in your position, or were you feeling not seen because you were only safe?
No, I felt good. I felt like I was steady.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I thought. And you had a kind of high placement with the Glamour Zone in Airways, so you were almost in the top. So the next week was the Spoof, where you had to do a parody of a RuPaul's song, and you were in a group that was doing Let the Music Play.
Right.
How did you feel about that, doing that? Because I guess that's kind of acting, but also singing at the same time.
Yeah, it was fun. It was funny. I got the opportunity to be camp and funny and silly, and I'm not the greatest singer, but I can sing. And so we just had a good time. I think Ru didn't like that we were making fun of Drag U, and he took offense to that, which I thought was like, listen, we're improvising here, and saying that it was a rough spot didn't make him feel very good.
Now, what was that Drag You lyric again?
That was a rough spot.
All right, that was one of my favorite jobs. Did change people's lives,
So he was sort of, that anger kind of followed into our next episode.
Well, that was literally going to be my question. When I watched that, I always felt like I couldn't tell whether he was being serious about being genuinely offended, because it didn't seem like, I thought it was kind of funny that, because they always make fun of Ru and him, his background, his singing. Like, people always make fun of the roast jokes about him and his career. So I was a bit confused as to whether he really did, whether that was genuine or whether that was kind of scripted, that he was offended by that.
I would say he wasn't horribly offended, but he didn't like it.
And how did that make, so when you were on set and you said the line for the first time, and obviously the track was already done, you couldn't change it.
Yeah, I felt like he was offended. I felt like he somehow thought it was disrespectful, because he thought they did a really nice job helping to change people's lives with that show.
Right. Okay. Well, that's interesting to know that wasn't put on, that it was that was how it genuinely happened.
Yeah.
And so, and also in that episode, Ginger Minge described, when you were doing the singing, she described you as being a mix between Ethel Merman and Paul Lynde.
Perfect. I mean, could it be more accurate? I loved it. I think of it as a compliment.
I was going to say, I mean, in the episode, they were trying to almost, I don't know if they were trying to push this storyline that you weren't good or something, but I was like, but she sounds exactly the way that Mrs. Kasha Davis would sound. Like, that's right. Exactly it. And so obviously your team was safe, but Kennedy, who was in your team, won the challenge. So I guess you could say that your team was kind of high.
Yes.
How did that feel then, being safe another time, potentially in a winning group?
I didn't have a problem with being safe. I thought that was a good thing.
And so then you go into the next week, and that is the DESPY Awards.
Yes.
You get paired with Katya to be in your duo, but also for the mini challenge, and she dressed up as Bjork, and you did Joan Rivers, which I thought was hysterical.
Yes.
And you then ended up winning the mini challenge and getting to be the hosts of the DESPY Awards. What did that feel like, sort of winning that mini challenge and then going into that?
Well, thinking back, I knew that there was a tendency that I was safe and I was not showing them enough, and I was worried that I wasn't going to get the chance to show more. So I thought, well, we're doing a runway for about fashion. Let me throw in Joan Rivers. So I did that as a quick, like, hey, just so you know, this is the kind of stuff that I can do, with hopes to encourage the producers to see me as a winner. And I thought it worked, and obviously we did win that. And then jump to the DESPY Awards. Obviously, we had prepared many jokes. Kathy Griffin didn't like them. She cut them. The producers took us backstage and cut more jokes. There was jokes cut about Michelle Visage's boobs. So we were down to 0 we basically were like, our script said, hello, go out on stage and improvise. I am a host. That's what I do. So I panicked because so many jokes were taken out. And Katya said, what are we going to do? And I said, we're just going to have to go wing it. And so when I went out, I said, welcome, obviously. And then they just really made a big deal out of that.
Oh my goodness, everyone. We want to welcome you to the first annual DESPY Awards.
I did not think I did horribly, but I also didn't think I did terrific. It was okay. I was nervous. I was in my head. Skipped to the lip sync. I thought I won it. And I was sort of like, oh, the old lady's going home. That's the first thought I thought in my head. And I thought, okay, I enjoyed the ride. But it was interesting to me. It was sort of like, I didn't necessarily think we were supported. Our jokes kept being removed. And I think that's all on me. I could have improvised. Katya could have improvised. And so we didn't do very well. We could have done more with just whatever. Just, now I know going forward that you just go in the moment and go for it. And maybe I should have done the jokes that they cut.
Well, because you hit the nail on the head with what you said. When I watched it, I really liked you and Katya's energy, and I thought you did really well. And you could tell you're a natural host. And like you said, I think they really did play up the you said welcome, like you mispronounced it. Like they made a big deal of it, and I was like, well, that's the only thing she got right. She got wrong.
Yeah.
So, did you think you were going to be in the bottom that week then?
No, it was kind of shocking to me. I mean, I didn't necessarily think, if thinking back, that I can remember who should have been, but even though I still think my lip sync was fun. I mean, I love Candy. She won. I think it could have been a tie, really. I don't think she did poorly. But yeah, of course I should think I won, right?
I will say I was surprised that you left that episode. It was quite shocking to me. As soon as the music started and you like pulled the slit in your skirt and you started dancing, I was like, oh, surely she's got this. So I was really surprised.
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
Look, carry on.
No. I was just going to say that it was one of those moments where when it hit me, when I walked off the stage, I was like, well, I did it. I got here, and now we'll see what's next.
Yeah, and obviously, so unfortunately, yeah, we've talked to you obviously in the bottom, and you were told to sashay away. One thing that I was going to ask actually about that moment was when the lip sync finished. They made it look like twice you went to say something to Candy, and then they cut it off and they put that sort of rattle shade noise in the background almost like she didn't even speak to you. Is that what actually happened?
Thank you. Mrs. Kasha Davis.
Yeah, I went to go give her a hug and she didn't reciprocate. So we are fine now. I don't know if she was just mad in the moment for being in the bottom and frustrated with the pressure of the competition. But I went to go give her a hug and she was like not having it. So I was like, okay. I mean, it's meant to be fun, right?
Yeah, and I guess it's all for TV, and they put the little shade noises in
of course,
to make it look like that. Was there anyone on set that you didn't really get on with in the moment at all? Like was Candy someone you genuinely didn't get on with or anything, or were you kind of good with everyone? Or
I would say I was good with everyone. I didn't have, Kennedy and I didn't necessarily click until after. Pearl and I were fine, and then we kind of lost touch after. Just natural things, changes in life. But I could text any one of them at this point, which is a wonderful feeling of a sisterhood.
Yeah, that's lovely. And I think you especially, you always came across as being very motherly, very warm. And I thought you would have been a contender for Miss Congeniality.
Oh, thank you. I live my life in a way that I try to, persist with kindness. When I see things happen with the girls, I'll send them a text, I'll send them a message on Instagram, all the contestants all over the world, with an effort to just be that mom-like character. So thank you for noticing.
And so yeah, obviously, unfortunately, you were told to sashay away, and you sort of you left, and you did make it. The only thing like the slight non-miscongeniality thing you said, but I thought it was funny. Was you made a slight comment. You said, "Oh, there are some queens in here who are just not trying, and I really want to be here." So you were kind of annoyed about leaving.
What the hell? I wasn't ready to leave. One of the things I think that frustrated me the most were certain people that like sort of gave up, and that kind of pisses me off, but such is life. It's the game.
Can you sort of, which queen were you referring to specifically, or queens?
Yes, Jasmine and Kennedy wanted to go home. They kept saying it, or not Kennedy. Jasmine and Candy wanted to go home. They kept saying it over and over. They're just like, let me go home. I want to go. I want to go. They had to coach Jasmine to come back to the set. It's very stressful. But I was not saying that. I was powering through. So it was interesting to me that like they know that that's happening and it's not necessarily filmed or used. But and Pearl, walked off the set and it was this big drama and Ru had to get all this conversation. And so those three, it's like, well, if they want to go, let them go and let the rest of us compete. So that was very frustrating for me.
Yeah, I can imagine, because you always seemed like the professional, the consummate professional. One thing we mentioned about Pearl, that was going to be one of my questions, and we sort of briefly touched on this earlier. So earlier in that episode was the infamous moment where Pearl and RuPaul had a bit of a standoff or sit off because she was sat down and she said, "Have I got something on my face?"
So there's something on my face.
Right.
Were you there for that moment, and did you see it happen?
So we were across the room, as it were, and the tension with the two of them was palpable. It was always a bit that way. I'm not sure why, per se. I think that it was maybe an older queen like Ru and myself not understanding Pearl's perspective, and sort of they just didn't necessarily get on. And she made it to the top, and she is an incredible artist, and she's sort of shift gears and she's doing different things now. But I think at any point, wherever she wants to go, she's well regarded and people think she's a fabulous queen and a hunk of a man. So, but yeah, I think the experience in itself was, it appeared as though, sometimes Pearl wanted to challenge Ru as much as Ru wanted to challenge Pearl. And I think Ru comes from a time where it was like, respect your elders and don't snap back at Ru. Like if you had a moment together, maybe vent about it with your sisters, but not snap. But Pearl was not going to back down. She was going to tell Ru right what she thought. And I think that bugged Ru.
Yeah, it was, it made for good television at the end of the day. So, you could tell there was maybe a slight personality clash. Maybe it was also a slight age thing as well. I don't know. But it was just interesting. That moment was just so gag-worthy. And I couldn't tell whether the other queens really caught on to it in the moment or whether it was on TV.
Oh, no. Yeah, we were well aware. There was yelling and people leaving and, all that stuff. You film for 12 to 15 hours a day, and the public gets to see what, half an hour.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot more intense when you cut out all the you only put in certain bits.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, unfortunately, you were eliminated. But then a few episodes later, they do the Conjoined Twins or Conjoined Queens, and all the eliminated queens come back, and you got partnered with Katia again.
Yes.
What was that like, getting that opportunity to come back?
Oh, it was fantastic. And I thought, I'm just going to go balls to the wall. If whatever we do, let's be as raunchy as possible with Cecilia. Stop filtering yourself and go for it. So we did it. And I thought it was fantastic. And everybody on set, including the queens, thought, well, Kasha's coming back, obviously. That's literally what was being said. And then, of course, Trixie came back, which we know she's outstanding. And you can argue that either way in that particular episode, but it was literally, it was said by everyone I shouldn't say everyone. Many people were saying, well, obviously Kasha's coming back. Kasha and Katia were terrific. But that's how the cards played out. And clearly, Trixie is a brand and is the type of drag that many people are looking for. And she's just an outstanding marketer, and she's an outstanding performer, and she's a musician and art. So I mean, there's no arguing the fact that she's a talent. I would say the same for myself. So that's where you have the opportunity. That's the platform. What are you going to do with it?
Yeah, and I was really surprised in a way that, I mean, I thought Trixie and Pearl did really well, but I really liked you and Katja. I thought you two were so funny. I really thought you were going to win. You two were going to win, and you were going to come back. So it's interesting to hear that everyone was on set was saying that as well, because on camera it kind of looked more like it was obvious that it was going to be Trixie and Pearl in a way, even though they liked you. But I really was like, I thought it was going to be you two.
Well, here we are today.
And so, yeah, unfortunately, you didn't get to come back, but, you had your amazing time, and you had actually a really good track record that you never fell in the bottom, apart from that one time, obviously, that you went home. You were either safe or high, but twice in 2 challenges, you were high. So I thought that was really fun, and you came across really well on the show. Is something, obviously you've talked about being on the show and how that changed your life. Is something like All Stars something you've ever thought about?
Yes, if they ever made that phone call, if I ever got the opportunity, I certainly would do it. I mean, I think the fact that I'm committed to this career and that the opportunity, if it were to present itself, so that more people who are watching, if they're not going back to season 7, they would maybe find, oh, let's learn more about Mrs. Kasha Davis. And that's what All Stars does for you.
Yeah, because I think you're the only member of the bitter old lady brigade that hasn't been on. So I was really surprised that you haven't been on yet. And so many people in the comments for the questions for you, pretty much every question was, is she going to be on All Stars? We love her. We want to see more of her.
Aww, that is so sweet. Well, tell them to send those questions to World of Wonder and RuPaul's Drag Race, and maybe we can start a petition.
Yeah, I'd love to see you on. I really loved you on the show. So, I mean, we any opportunity to get a bit more Kasha Davis in our life, then that's always good for me.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
And so obviously the name of my channel is Drag Tea Served. So I was wondering if you could serve me some drag tea and tell me maybe something that happened off camera or something that wasn't shown that you wish had been shown from the show.
My favorite thing in the answer to that is that we had a phone call from home, and it was my husband, Mr. Davis, and my darling daughters and our dog. And it was darling, and it was so sweet. And I cried, and everybody cried, and they said, we love your husband. And the kids were so supportive, and it wasn't used. And I believe they used Ginger's boyfriend at the time in place of that for Untucked. And it would have been just such a wonderful thing, in my opinion, to show the further example of Mr. and Mrs. Davis and our children. Our youngest now just got married 2 weeks ago. She and her husband, we had a huge wedding. And so, I like to be an open book and to share these experiences, share my sobriety, share my marriage, share these journeys with hopes to inspire people, because I didn't have those examples as a child. So that would have been great. I have a little beef with them that they don't maybe just throw that up as like unseen footage or something, but they didn't, and they don't. So hopefully someday I'll get the call and I'll have the opportunity to show more in the future.
Yeah, definitely. And that seems like that would be a really sweet moment. I like those phone calls. And I think also for you, having children there's quite a small group of Drag Race queens that have children. So that's sort of, you're in quite a small group in that. Are the children, are they, if you don't mind me asking, sort of biologically yours or your husband's, or are they, because I was trying to figure it out online. I couldn't quite figure it out.
Yeah. Well, I'm their stepdad. Their dad is Mr. Davis, and their mom and I are close. We're all one family. We get together for holidays. Her mom and I went to shop for the wedding dress. So they were very kind to include me in the family. I met them when they were 7 and 9. And Steve said to me one time we were dating, he was like, so I have something to tell you. And I thought it was gonna be the friends conversation, And instead he said, I have children. And I was like over the moon because growing up, that's all I ever wanted. And I didn't understand that you could adopt. I didn't think that you can have children. No one was doing that back then, or at least the people that I would see were not doing that. And so it was a dream come true.
Oh, that's lovely. And it's really lovely that you've got that kind of family through your husband as well, and then sort of become your family, and you've seen them grow up and now they're getting married.
Yes, married. Now we can hope and get ready for grandkids. No pressure, but it would be lovely to be Mrs. Davis, the grandmother.
I can only imagine you as a grandmother.
Well, obviously I don't live as Mrs. Kasha Davis. I live as Ed, he, him. So, but both he, him, and she, her would spoil those children. I have such a passion for kids, and I've written 3 children's books, and my live story hour starts back up again this week. We've sold out both performances at 100 people per. It's a small theater, 100 people per, and we have created a children's television show that has 4 episodes called Imagination Station. So we're hoping to get that at some point picked up. PBS was looking at it, maybe Hulu, who knows? Somebody will take a chance with the drag queen, television show, very much like a story hour. And what's exciting is imagine Mrs. Doubtfire hosting Pee-wee's Playhouse in Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. That's the general vibe of this. And I think it's important because not only was that something that wasn't there when I was a child, but when I go to DragCon, many people are there with their kids. Many kids are interested in drag. And I think it would be a marvelous thing to get people right from an early age, not only loving themselves, but if they see somebody different in the world, to treat them with kindness.
Yeah, and that's a lovely message. And I think it's so important, as because I'm a children's book author as well. I've written children's books, so it's definitely something that I think is so important. And one of the questions from my subscribers actually was about your children's books, your TV show, and whether you had got any traction on it. And they kind of want to know. They said that they shared stories with their niece, and it's helped the father ease into becoming a better ally as he saw a positive impact your videos had on their child.
That is so wonderful to hear. That's the best payment ever, right? Because that is what I hear so many times from dads or uncles or moms. Just, thank you for showing me that my kids have a community, that they're going to be okay. And you've got to send me the links to your children's books, because you never know. Maybe these are some books that I can use in story time.
Yes, please. I mean, great. And so, yeah, I'd love to move on to some more subscriber questions, if I may. Like I said earlier, I had lots and lots of questions for you. The most amount of questions I've ever had, I think.
Oh, that's so sweet.
So a lot of them, I would say, were not technically questions, because they said, just tell her we love her. We want to see more of her. She's our favorite. She's so warm, lovely. There were lots and lots of ones just like that. But in terms of an actual question, someone said, how did you decide to use your "there's always time for a cocktail" catchphrase? And what would be your favorite cocktail or mocktail, obviously, because of sobriety? That's
right. So "There's Always Time for a Cocktail" was a hit with the show that I mentioned with Pandora and I. So I wanted as a marketer, I wanted to direct people to that video. And I wanted to just have that catchphrase. So that's where that came from. And at the time, I was a big old drinker. I love a nice wine. I loved a Chardonnay. I loved a box wine because I wanted more. I loved Tanqueray and tonic. I never really liked fruity drinks. So I liked, something that really gets you. I never really liked a mixer. As a matter of fact, when I'd pour a mixer into my gin or vodka, I just blow a little bit off, just a touch.
Yeah, so actually someone, because obviously in your exit line, they said, RuPaul said something about Mr. Davis, and then he said, you better have that box wine chilling.
Call Mr. Davis and tell him Mama's coming home.
He better have that box wine chilling.
Someone did ask, did he have a box wine chilling for you?
He did. And at the time, he knew that when I came home, I had to have that box wine. And boy, it was an emotional time, but it was there.
It's lovely that now it's not boxed wine, it's just tea or whatever it is that you're drinking. So,
Seltzer, yeah, club soda.
And someone else asked, what would you consider to be your proudest moment in drag?
Oh, when I was watching Imagination Station, we did a premiere at a local theater here, and we had a nice full audience, and there it was. Because I know it's going to get picked up at some point, and I know it's going to make traction. It's just going to take somebody with the guts to do it. I would say that, and the documentary Workhorse Queen. I can't believe that this individual, Angela Washko, wanted to tell my story. And of course, it ends with the desire to do a children's television show. And so those two moments to make the impact, more than going on stage and lip syncing and doing a show, these are two things that will be there. Film is going to stay forever, right? And so they'll be there as a story of hope and positivity.
That's lovely. And I think you are exactly the sort of person I can imagine being a great storyteller, like children's story time, drag story time. You are that person. And you also, because I actually saw that you did a series a few years back for WoW about pets and stuff. And
yes,
you were so funny on that. And I thought you were such a natural presenter and so naturally funny and warm. I could see why that would translate very easily to children's TV presenting.
Yes, thank you. Pets for Pets with Devin Green. We had some guests. We had Alaska on with her snake. But it was fun, and it was just another angle to see, people with their pets, and everybody loves animals. And it was a WoW Presents kind of a show. So then we had another one called This Is Shit. And the whole point of that is that so many people will be like, oh, they'll make a judgment on your product or what you're putting out. And so we wanted to head that off right off the bat. But then also is that we all go through some negative times. So Brock McGillis was the first out gay hockey player in Canada, and we became friends. And I thought this was great because the sports kids used to bully me, and I'm here as a drag queen. So we came together, and then we told stories about how to find your light, your positivity, your strength. And so it was a sort of a self-help style show, and a talk about the you had to go through to get to that place.
That's a great message. And I think it's something that is worth repeating as well, that not everything is going to be great, but that doesn't matter ultimately.
Well, it's temporary, right? So everything is temporary. The good is temporary, and so is the bad. And so we have sometimes to go through certain things in order to learn. If we're not learning, we're not living. So if we're in that moment, what I would do in the past, I would drink to anesthetize those bad feelings, and then I never really got through them to get to the other side, and I slowed progress.
No, I mean, that's a very wise and insightful way of looking at it. So that's very good advice. And speaking of like TV shows and things we were talking about, wow, someone asked, would you do a duo with Tempest du Jour? I loved your chemistry on the episode.
Yes, Tempest and I always talk about doing different shows. She's just recently getting to married again, and she's having a wonderful life in the beginning of another relationship. So I think there's time for that. I think we can certainly bridge that gap and find that time to do it, because we just, we're two truly bitter old ladies, and just would have fun. And our take on things is sort of like dad jokes in a dress.
Yeah, I mean, I remember watching that episode of and you two came on. And I thought it was so funny, and I thought they're definitely going to have their own show. Like I would watch that show. It was so good.
Oh, thank you.
And someone asked, how is Mr. Davis?
Oh, he's fantastic. He's a dreamboat. He's just wonderful. He's upstairs, right above me, working from home, which has been wonderful. And we have had, because of the pandemic, what do I always say is that you make lemonade out of lemons. And the lemon was he couldn't go into work. So it was like early retirement in a way for us. And, you know, of course he's still working and I'm doing this type of drag. And we were able to take our dog for a walk and spend more time together and fall deeper in love. I mean, he's my best friend and he gets me. He knows when I need quiet and he knows when I need to talk, and he's a good listener. So we've been having a wonderful time, specifically these last couple of years, both with my sobriety journey, but also him working from home. And, you know, sometimes when he's got a couple conference calls, I'll be like, I'm going to Starbucks, you know, or I'll go out to the stores, and we'll get a little moment away from each other. But we could spend all day together, all night together, and we can talk a lot, or we could just be quiet. We enjoy each other's company.
That's very sweet. And I think they always say that's the mark of a good relationship. If you can be quiet together and not have to say anything, that's kind of like post-verbal communication. It's kind of beyond that. That's the ultimate goal.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for answering all my questions. I'd love to get on to my quick fire round, if I may.
Oh, okay.
So it's just 5 quick questions. Some are drag related, some are not. They're just 5 silly questions. But it's sort of top of your mind first answer. Lipstick or lip gloss?
Lipstick. Matte.
Yes or no, pineapple on pizza?
Yes.
Favorite emoji? Cocktail or champagne?
Oh, back in the day, cocktail.
And can you summarize your experience on Drag Race in 1 word?
Life-changing.
Thank you so much. It's been so lovely to hear from you, and I'm sure my subscribers have loved to hear the answers to the questions and learn a bit more about you. If people want to, you know, learn more about you and see more, where can people find, you know, social media and things like that, and your new projects coming up?
You can go to mrskashadavis.com. You can go to Instasnatch, Twatter, Faceplace, all Mrs. Kasha Davis. My 3rd children's book is Has Anyone Said I Love You? There it is. And of course, we have Imagination Station page on Instagram. And I think the best thing is just Google Mrs. Kasha Davis, and you'll see all the different things that come up. But really, definitely social media. And we're very excited that Workhorse Queen continues to stream all around the world at this point. It's a documentary that dives deeper into my life story. And Imagination Station, we're waiting for that right streaming platform to pick us up. We've got 4 episodes all in the can, and we're ready to do more.
Well, I'm sure we'd love to see it, and let's hope that it does get picked up. But I think the main thing I want is just more of Mrs. Kasha Davis, whether it's All Stars, whether it's more of your other projects. We just want more of you because we love you.
Oh, well, that just makes me feel fantastic, and I appreciate it. And I can't wait to get back over. I've loved the times that I've spent over in the UK, and it's wonderful.
Well, thank you so much. It's been lovely to speak to you. And I guess there's always time for a cocktail, right?
There's always time for a cocktail. Woo!
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.